Okay, next time I should get some music with the countdown timer. So, welcome to another edition of the Teflon Tales. Today with me, I have Jessica Smith. Welcome to the show, Jessica.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Excited to have you here. And just for those who are watching this for the first time, the Teflon Tales is a weekly show that I host on Wednesdays, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. As the name suggests, it's really the showcasing of people who are living a Teflon life. And what is a Teflon life? Hey, you get hot quickly, you cool down, remain balanced, flexible, and remain non-sticky. Okay, enough of that. So Jessica got introduced to me through Kevin Metcalf, who I met about 3 weeks ago, and he was a guest on this show. I met Kevin through Aisha Prakash, who I met about a couple of months ago, and she was a guest on the show. You can get the drift of that, right? So Jessica, I know you and I chatted a bit before the show began. I know you're a big advocate for child protection, and you do a lot of work with the National Child Protection Task Force. Talk a little bit about what is NCPTF about, and specifically what do you do there?
So my background is in criminal justice. I have a degree in criminal justice and psychology, as well as a master's in criminal justice. And I, growing up, was one of those nerdy kids that just really didn't have a problem obeying the rules. I always just kind of knew that I would end up in some sort of criminal justice field. And as I got older and really started to try to figure out, okay, well, what part of this field? I knew that I wasn't cut out for law enforcement. And so I started pursuing more of the analytical options. And again, even in that realm, there's so many different options out there. And so I knew that I needed to spend some time at some point in child protection, child exploitation, human trafficking, because it's just something that pulls at your heartstrings so easily. I think we can all agree that this is an area of life in this world that just shouldn't exist. And so when I started looking into this topic more, researching it, trying to figure out what my next move might be career-wise and how I could get into this area. I got an email sent to me by a colleague that said, "Hey, there's this conference going on. It's being put on by the National Child Protection Task Force. I know that you're really, really interested in this area." The conference actually happened to start literally the very next week. And thankfully it was virtual because we were all in lockdown. And so I was able to attend without any issue. And I sent Kevin an email immediately and just said, "Hey, this is my skill set. This is my background. I would love to help in any way that I can." And there's a running joke amidst NCPTF that when you do that, you're going to get Metcalfed. And and I did, and it's been great. So he's very, very open, and he wants people within our organization who are passionate and who are driven and who are going to work hard and who have a heart for this work, which is not an easy thing to do. And so I'm just so incredibly happy that random email showed up in my inbox and that I get to be a part of this fantastic organization.
Okay, so I'm going to put you on the spot. It probably isn't as random as you think, right? Lots of times we have these patterns that happen in our lives and we think things are random, but clearly, in your case, there was a mission behind it that started off early. For the large percent of viewers, myself included, right? Lots of times we have all of these crazy ideas or notions what we want to do, right? But they're afraid to make that first step forward, which is probably the hardest thing. So in your case, talk about like what are some of the other things early on that you might have tried and said, "Hey, this is not for me." And at what point did you realize, okay, this is really what you want to be doing and really one that you can actually spend time with?
I've growing up, we all kind of, theorize and fantasize about the different types of lines of work that we might get into. For a while, I was convinced that I was going to go to school for theater and literature because I love both of those things. And I also considered med school for a while. I considered law school for a while. I even took the LSAT after I graduated from college and was kind of preparing to go back to law school. And as I kind of sat back and started thinking about it, I wasn't at a point where I had fully decided what exactly I wanted to do. And it was really important to me to find a job that I loved and that a career that I loved, and that, I didn't want to become one of those people who wakes up every day and has to go to work and feels like it's a chore to be there. And I know that so many people struggle with that. And I was bound and determined to not become one of those people. And so when I finally said, you know what, I'm gonna hold off on law school. I can always do that later, and I'm gonna instead just go back and get my master's. While I continued to explore what I want to do, I was working in the public sector at that point, doing internal sexual harassment investigations, as well as legal services, different litigation work. So that was kind of the legal side of it. But one thing that always kind of drew me in that arena was victim services. And I knew at that point I had applied for some jobs, and just due to education and requirements and different things like that, I wasn't able to pursue that path. And so it was kind of at that point that I said, okay, well, like what's that next then? I'm at a point in my life where I can kind of try things with very, very little risk because I didn't have children. And so I decided to pursue the private sector, and I think that it was the best decision that I ever made. I firmly believe that everything happens for a reason, and we're all led down paths where we are supposed to go, even if we feel like it's taking us off track a little bit. But all of that has given me a perspective that I don't think that everybody within the criminal justice system has. Many people will spend their entire lives in one particular part of the criminal justice arena. You know, if you're a police officer, you typically spend your entire career as a police officer, which is fantastic. And more power to those people who find that first job and they love it and they spend their entire career there. It took me a little while to find kind of where I was supposed to be and how I fit into this world, but I'm really glad that I did, because it led me to NCPTF, and I feel very confident in saying I know exactly that I am where I am supposed to be right now in life in terms of my profession.
Isn't that a wonderful feeling, right? You get that, satisfaction. But it, again, like you said, it comes with the trial and error that you you articulated so well. So I'm going to talk about something that you had posted on LinkedIn, and I have a quote over here. So I love what I do and consider myself so blessed to have a career that I'm truly excited and inspired by every day. But that often means I want to burn the candle at both ends and internalize failure deeply because I care so much about the solutions I strive for. There's no reason I can't learn how to do things a little differently, even when I'm happy and loving my work. This took a long time for me to internalize because it has so much packed within it. And again, it epitomizes Teflon, which is just because you're hot doesn't mean you've gotten the formula right. So lots of people, it's like, hey, I've cracked it. I'm there where I want to be. So how do you kind of continue building even though you think you're there? At the same time, you mentioned something else, which is also the Teflon analogy, which is how do you make sure that you cool down and don't burn both ends of the candle?
Well, lots of questions in there. No, I think that's great. So I think that I'm a little bit weird in this, in the kind of culture that we live in. We live in a culture that really, really tends to punish failure. And that creates a lot of fear, right? We're fearful that we're going to lose our jobs. We're fearful that we're going to disappoint our spouses. We're fearful that we're going to hurt our friends, or any type of failure. And the reality is, like, that's how we learn, that's how we grow, that's how we become better. And as much as it tends to emotionally hurt when I fail, because I'm so dedicated to my work and doing what I do correctly, I know that mentally this is a great opportunity for me to pivot and to try something differently and do something different. And when you look back, even just over the course of the last year, but also over the last 10 years, and you look at who you were then and who you are now, I remember hearing something that said, kind of think about yourself 10 years ago and take stock of what you've done and what you've become. Did you ever think that you would be able to do all of the things that you've done? And none of that would have happened without some failures and some obstacles and pitfalls along the way. So I don't always do it well. I don't always do it gracefully, but I really, really try to embrace failure. I try to make sure that my children embrace failure. We talk about it. We talk about, okay, what can we do differently next time? What can we do better? And I right, wrong, or indifferent, I don't have any problem admitting when I'm wrong. And because it gives me an opportunity to say, this is something that I don't know, and it allows me to go learn it. And again, like, I'm a total nerd, loved school, would do it for the rest of my life if I didn't actually have to like do the homework and turn in the assignments or pay for it. But again, like, failure is an opportunity to learn and to try something new. In terms of not burning the candle at both ends, if I knew how to not do that, I would write a book and probably make a lot of money. But I think the big takeaway, at least for me, is because I love what I do, it doesn't feel like burnout. There's definitely times where I have to say, you know what, I need a break, I need to rest, I need to do something different. And typically that means disconnecting from my phone, disconnecting from my email, going and spending time with my kids, and just making sure that I'm, loving on them and being a mom and being a wife and loving my life versus worrying about other people's, which is really, really hard for me to do in my role within NCPTF, because we are so dedicated to saving lives and saving lives of children who are in really, really nasty and terrible situations. But it's important to practice balance, and sometimes we have to force each other to step away. I think we have this great family relationship. You have to, when you work in this space, honesty and ego is not a thing, and honesty is everything. So we have no problem saying, you know what, you seem like this is getting to you a little bit. Why don't you step away for the night? We got it. And then we lean on each other to make sure that we get the rest that we need, make sure that we're forcing other people to get rest when they need it. And then we come back and we rally and we do it all again. So I hope that answers some of your questions.
No, it's great. I think the perspective that you bring in terms of having a community that actually watches out for you is super important, right? Because for any high achiever type A, it's like, hey, you go, go, go. And then that doesn't. So again, that segues into my next question, which is, you were thoughtful and you embraced failure, you learned from it. For lots of people, and you mentioned early on, it was easier to take a risk before you had kids. But then I've seen the counter argument, right? It's never easy to take a risk. Hey, I have a job right now, I have kids right now, I'm early in my career, and everything is dependent on my next job. So people make excuses, myself included, throughout your life as to why taking a risk at that point is too much of a risk, right? So what advice do you have for people out there, whether early, whether mid-career, late career, saying, hey, this isn't where I wanted to be? Again, going back to your 10-year ago argument, right, which is this where you want to be? And grateful that you're at that place where you can say, hey, this is exactly where I want to be. Lots of people aren't. So for them, what advice do you have in terms of how do they, again, make that first step to not worry about the imposter syndrome, not worry about what the judgmental world is telling you, not even worry about the failure, given the fact that you haven't done enough experimentation? Again, what advice do you have?
Gosh, I'm the last person who should be giving any sort of advice on not having imposter syndrome, because I feel like I'm the queen of imposter syndrome. But like I said before, it is so, we spend so much time working. You have to do something. Even if you don't love every second of it every day, you have to find at least some sort of satisfaction out of it. I tend to overanalyze things to a fault, but sometimes, every once in a while, there's a silver lining to that maybe character flaw, if you will, and forcing yourself to look for the good things, I think, is really, really important, especially in the world that we're living in now, with being in a pandemic, being stuck at home, not necessarily being able to see our loved ones. Practicing gratitude is really, really hard, but it's also really important. And just little reminders or little ways that you can kind of look at what you're doing differently or from a different perspective, I think, is really important. If you're in the food service industry, perhaps you're not feeling like I'm not doing a whole lot of good. I don't feel like I'm really, really, in a place that is mission driven. Well, hunger is a really, really big problem in our world. And, you might not be bringing meals to children in third world countries, but you are ensuring that people have food to eat.
Yeah.
It's just a different way of looking at it. But I think for me personally, I heard something a long time ago, and I can't remember how old I was, but I was at one of those points in my life that I was really, really trying to figure out where I fit into this world. and what my purpose was. And it's a little bit fortune cookie sounding, but at the time it was really, really impactful for me. And it was a quote that said, if you're ever trying to figure out what your purpose is, lean into what breaks your heart and follow that.
Hmm.
And I know that that's not always easy for everyone because we can't all be in the child exploitation field. We're not all built for that. And we have other passions and different things. But for me, that was what I needed to hear to figure out the next step that I personally needed to take. So I think maybe the more mature version of that is figure out what nourishes your soul and go that direction. So if that is art, if that is helping, if that is child exploitation, if it is baking, if it is, and even if you can't do it as a career, sometimes that's even better because then you're not putting so much pressure on that passion to be your moneymaker. I am very, very lucky and probably a glutton for punishment in a way because my passion is what I do for my day job as well as a part of NCPTF. But I think really, really digging deep and figuring out what moves your heart and what is going to fill your soul up in a way that nothing else in this world can. That is going to give you so much confidence and so much power to be able to take those risks. And of course, you need to do them with thought and with a calculated mind and taking stock of what you need to do. Many of us are not in a position where we can just quit and run out the door and still ensure that our bills are paid and there is food on our table for our kids and things like that. But if you're motivated and you're thoughtful, you can make changes. And it's really, really never too late to do that, even if they're little changes like volunteering for an organization after you come home from your day job. It doesn't matter when and how your soul is fueled, as long as it is at some point. And that's the sustenance you need to get from day to day.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, what breaks your heart, what nourishes your soul. I love that. And you have a big fan over here who wants to say something to you.
Hi, Kevin.
Hey, Kevin. Good to see you on the show. So talking about something else that you had posted, and this was a really interesting article. I'm going to read it over here for MIT Tech Review. The title is Guide to Being an Ethical Online Investigator. And it's an interesting part because you mentioned, right, you got to go deep. And in this world where it's misinformation, disinformation, data scraping, a lot of things come at you, right? And especially in this kind of role where you have to absorb so much, at the same time, got to let go of so much and not kind of be the judge, jury, executioner all in one. How do you deal with that?
That's a really good question. We talked a little bit about compartmentalization and how important that is. And I think all of us, for better or worse, in NCPTF, we might be a little bit strange and odd, but we do have this really weird ability to compartmentalize things. But even more so, I think we have the ability to use emotion as fuel. And so rather than letting it cloud what we look for, we let it power how we look for things. For me personally, the stuff that we look at is really, really heartbreaking and it's really frustrating. And it can get really, really difficult when you start finding stuff that is, confirming the worst possible scenario for this child. But rather than focusing on the what is showing up, I take that information, or I take that emotion, that anger, that frustration, that sadness, and it's like, okay, well, what else can I find? Like, how else can I get to what I need to get so that law enforcement can get this child out of here? It's no different than when you're working out and you've had a bad day at work. You tend to lift a little more weight, you tend to run a little faster, a little harder. It's that same thing. So I'm able to take that emotion and harness it in a way that I ensure that it doesn't affect, again, like what I'm looking for, but instead it is impacting how I'm looking for it. And that comes with other challenges, because then I have to force myself away from the computer at 2:00 in the morning to go to bed, because I'm still angry and I want to find what I need to find. But I think that is one of the ways that I ensure that I'm not looking for information that is going to confirm my own biases, or I'm not disregarding information that is in fact relevant to the investigation just because I think, well, XYZ, like this isn't necessary, or this isn't relevant, or it makes me upset, so I'm not going to include it.
Wow. So one last question, and again, this is a loaded one, so be prepared. Okay. You mentioned that failure is frowned upon and success is binary, right? Either you failed or you succeeded. And yet, having talked to Kevin and now talking to you, I can clearly see in the role that you're in NCPTF, sometimes it's neither failure nor success, right? So you have this ether in between. And again, the larger question for the larger community is, lots of times it's like, hey, did you succeed? Like the bar has to change, because did you do a little bit for somebody who otherwise didn't get anything? So how did you kind of compartmentalize the day job where it's like you and I, we have binary success metrics, and then this, which is a little bit more diffused in terms of what does success really mean? I told you it was loaded.
Yes. So within the OSINT community, we have a little saying where a lack of finding is still a finding. And that, even though that is really, really hard to digest in certain investigations, particularly when you're looking for a missing child, at a certain point, we're not clairvoyant. We're not superheroes. Yeah. There is truly only so much that we can do. And as much as all of us like to joke about our willingness to go kick in doors, no one is going to let us do that. So our arena, our battle is behind a computer screen. And we have to be okay with sometimes not finding something. And even though that is really, really difficult to digest, if we can't pick ourselves up and move on from that, the next child, the next case is going to suffer. And so at the end of the day, like, that's just something that we have to come to terms with. And we carry it with us. It hangs on our hearts. There are plenty of nights that I go to bed thinking about these kids or thinking about these cases, and I'm, dreaming about them, thinking about different tactics that I could try the next day. And, did I check this? Did I not check that? We're going to fail, and we're going to succeed. And then we're going to hit points where truly, like, we're just stuck and there's nothing more that we can do. But at the end of the day, I know that what we're doing is important. And I know that we have saved kids. We will continue to save kids. And if at the end of my career, I have only been able to help rescue one child, that is one family that I have been able to keep intact. That's one mom who's just like me, who doesn't have to go to bed without her son or daughter. That's one brother or sister who isn't going to grow up without their sibling being able to wrestle or play or razz on each other. And that is so much more than enough. So I don't know. I know that's not very tactical in terms of what people can take and like implement into their lives, but it's
yeah. No, yeah, I know it's emotionally, and I was tearing up as you were talking. Just, I mean, one life saved is one life saved, but you can't measure that against a graph and say, okay, I need to get to 10. And again, the part of having people like you on the show is just to educate others. I had one guest, Rana Pratap, about 4 months ago, and he goes and saves literally feeds about 300 to 400 homeless dogs every night.
I love that so much.
So again, he has a day job. And he comes home, cooks food, makes 3 trips, even during the lockdown, right? So again, kudos to him, kudos to you for again showing the light and giving others a little bit more a guiding post, if you will, in terms of how they can find out what drives them, and again be in that happy place, a purposeful place. So again, thanks for your time. And again, we're getting more folks from NCPDF on the show, thanks to Kevin. So Jessica, thanks for joining me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Likewise. Thanks, Jessica.
Bye-bye.